And this is the Capricorn new moon, power of intention. I feel this positive energy in the air. And I think this is the best new moon for setting your intentions.
This video is about intention, but we will not be consulting the stars for help with setting intentions. Instead, we are studying Rudolf Steiner's philosophy of freedom. The philosophy of freedom is not a New Age or spiritualistic worldview. It is a scientific worldview. The philosophy of freedom is a science of freedom based on Steiner's introspective observations of human nature. The observations described in the book can be verified by any normal person who is willing to put in the effort required to examine their own thought processes. To call an action a real act of will, it needs an intention. The intention of an act of will is the motive. The motive is the goal, purpose, or intention of the act of will. An act of will also requires the driving force of one's character. In the previous video, we discussed the different levels of character. Our characterological disposition is made up of instincts, feelings, the individual ideas of our practical experience, and the system of concepts of our practical reasoning. These are the forces that can drive an act of will. In this video, we will look at the different levels of motive. The motive is a momentary concept or idea that guides the action. This is the second of two videos that describe the different levels of morality. These videos are part of a series called The Keys to Self-Motivation and Free Will. To learn more, go to philosophy-of-freedom.com. Okay, let's talk about motives. The motive of an action can be a universal concept such as an ethical principle, or it might be an individual idea such as getting a sandwich for lunch. The lowest level of motive is egoism. Egoistic morality is based on the principle of attaining the greatest amount of pleasure for oneself. The action of the egoist depends on specific ideas of what brings him pleasure. At level 2, moral authority, there is moral growth by basing action on a set of universal ethical principles. People submit to a system of ethical principles given to them by an outside moral authority. Level 3 is called the highest principle. Level 3 is reached when the individual rejects the authority of others and instead thinks for himself. He decides which principle is the most important based on his knowledge of ethical principles and human need. Then he commits himself to conduct based on what he considers to be the highest ethical principle. But there is a higher level that is more demanding. The highest level is the situational principle. At level 4, the individual sees a value in all ethical principles. He selects the ethical principle he considers to be the right one to apply in each specific life situation. By learning about the different levels of morality, we can review our own behavior and recognize what we need to work on to advance our moral development. Now I'm going to go into more detail about the different levels of motive. The first level of motive is egoism. The principle of producing the greatest amount of pleasure for oneself through one's action, that is, of attaining individual happiness, is called egoism. The ethical principle of egoism is to act in a self-serving way. There are two kinds of egoism: pure egoism and morality of prudence. Pure egoism is ruthlessly considering only one's own well-being, even at the cost of the happiness of others. In 2017, Apple CEO Tim Cook made approximately $107 million. To increase profits, factories that produce Apple's iPhone have been accused of ruthlessly exploiting child labor. The morality of prudence is furthering the well-being of others because one expects to gain from it indirectly, or because of fear. An example of this is celebrities and corporations who often help others for the self-serving purpose of improving their own public image. Egoism gave us the giant donation check. The self-serving acts of the egoist depend on what he considers to be the good things of life. He may pursue the luxurious living of materialism, or be a self-serving spiritualist seeking to save himself from evil. Moral authority is a second level of motive. Moral authority is action that is based on a system of ethical principles. The establishing of this moral necessity is left to those who demand our moral submission, that is, to whatever moral authority we recognize. At this level, a person submits to a set of ethical principles or laws that are established by an authority, such as the head of family, the state, social custom, authority of the church, or divine revelation. Today, the tech giants of Silicon Valley have become the most powerful moral authority. By controlling information, they decide what ideas will fill our minds. The ideas they implant in our heads have a strong influence on our views and behavior. If they do not approve of an idea, it is censored, along with the people who express unapproved views. The tech giants have become today's book burners. The most effective way to remove human freedom is not imprisonment. It is to attack free thought. External powers may prevent me from doing what I will. Then they simply condemn me to do nothing. Not until they enslave my mind, drive my motives out of my head, and put their own motives in the place of mine do they really intend to make me unfree. This is why the church not only attacks actions, but is especially against impure thoughts that motivate action. And for the church, all motives are impure that it has not authorized. The tech giants have replaced the church as the dominant moral authority demanding purity of thought. Through the use of an all-seeing and all-hearing mechanical artificial intelligence, the tech giants are able to police the internet and purge all thoughts they consider to be impure. The lords of Silicon Valley are setting the rules of morality and silencing those who disobey with deplatforming. Surprisingly, corporate censorship of ideas has the support of many people. It is easy to conform and let others set the rules, but there are those who value freedom enough to stand up and take action. The spiritualist belief in the authority of an inner voice also removes freedom. This is called moral autonomy. Another example of an external authority is when we believe we hear a voice in our mind to which we must submit. A person obeys a voice in their head, believing it comes from a higher power. This authority is sometimes called the voice of conscience. Level 3 is called the highest principle. To advance from morality based on authority to conduct based on ethical insight, a person considers the needs of moral life and will let this knowledge determine his actions. Ethical principles can be placed in 3 categories based on the needs of moral life. The needs of moral life are the greatest good for all humanity, the progress of culture, and the moral goals of the individual. In level 3, a person decides which moral need is more important: the needs of humanity, the needs of culture, or the needs of the individual. After thoughtful deliberation, he commits himself to the one he considers to be the highest principle. What do you consider to be the most important ethical principle? Do you favor the common good, the cultural good, or the individual good? The common good favors humanity as a group. It strives to do whatever, in his opinion, best promotes the greatest possible good for all humanity. The cultural good strives to advance civilization. It sees a moral necessity in the progress of culture. The individual good favors the individual. It is the realization of individual moral goals that have been grasped by pure intuition. Why must the moral goal be grasped intuitively? When the moral intention is grasped intuitively, it means the source of morality is the individual alone. Committing to one of these ethical principles can turn a person into a collectivist, an individualist, or a fighter in the cultural war. If a person's action is based on a single fixed principle, such as collectivism, he becomes a higher form of automaton, an NPC whose behavior is predictable. When faced with a life situation, the gear wheels of his mind will produce a collectivist action that is best for the group. At level 4, we advance to the highest conceivable ethical principle. I call it the situational principle. The highest ethical action does not start with a set system of ethical principles imposed by an authority, or a single ethical principle considered to be the highest. There is yet a higher viewpoint that does not start from one specific ethical principle in each case, but sees a certain value in all ethical principles, and in each case ask whether one or another principle is more important. In each life situation, the individual selects the principle he considers to be the right one. This is experienced as an impulse to act that springs from intuitive insight. All other determining factors step back. Conceptual intuition motivates the action. Depending on the situation, the right principle may be the progress of culture. In another situation, it may be the common good. In a third situation, I may choose to further my own good. The universal ethical principle selected is then translated into a specific individual idea that becomes the goal of the action. The best way to understand what I am describing is to become aware of those moments of intuitive insight. Notice when an intuitive insight is the impulse to act. Also notice how this conceptual insight is empowering, as it brings certainty, love, and willfulness to the action. The key to this level of morality is having developed the ability of conceptual intuition. I am not here to talk about spiritual theories we do not experience. Become aware of the source of your thoughts. Are they cold, habitual thoughts that keep repeating themselves? Are they thoughts implanted in your head by others? Are they thoughts you must obey because you fear the consequences of disobedience? Or are they new or refreshed thoughts that spring into your mind to inspire the free deeds of a free individual?